23rd of September 2025. I'm Dana. Welcome. We're just going to cover a single story and timeline, the Japanese nuclear emergency, an overview. And it's by IEE Spectrum. It's by IEE Spectrum. An IEE Spectrum is 4800. Is a 4800. It's 4,800 or 4,800, 480,000 academics. It's a huge organization, extremely well funded, very influential, and they kind of set the standards for 20% of science on the planet. And so this is madness that these people have the ability to tell lies that are devastating to every species on the planet, that are health-wise catastrophic to everything on the planet. They're the world's largest technical professional organization. Institute of 4,886 engineers and professionals, and corporate offices. They're a massive entity, and they're unbelievable. These are the technical societies. They're extremely influential. And they hate me, they hate you, they hate the 8 million species. And I'll show you that information tonight. It's just unconscionable that you can have that many evil people in one place. It's unconscionable. Fuck off. It's unconscionable that people like this can exist. Did all the media, universities, etc., worldwide conspire to allow Earth to die of radiation poisoning? That's quite the claim, right? That's quite the claim. And what you're going to see tonight, unfortunately, is that is true. And this was one of the entities, a very influential entity, very powerful entity that has worked diligently to destroy your future and the future of every species on this planet. And I mean, that should break your heart that these organizations could actually exist. So this story is the 15th of March 2011. We compiled the recent happening from information released by TEPCO and the perpetual evil. They've been evil since they existed. the International Atomic Energy Agency, United Nations, they don't have friggin' single redeeming quality to them. Not a single redeeming quality. So it's going to start off, what they're going to do is give you a timeline. And it took me 2 days to go through this story because they told so many lies that are so easy to prove, thank goodness. And you know me, not much shocks me anymore. And same with anybody that's regularly here. And this shocked me. This whole story shocks me. So they start off with Friday, and everybody's pretty familiar with that. Everybody's pretty familiar with that. 130 kilometers off the coastline, which turns out not to be that far. Shakes the country. Tsunami with waves as high as 10 meters. The waves actually reached 140 feet in some places. Authorities report on a fire at Onagawa nuclear power plant, later extinguished. So this is the 11th. This is Friday, the day of the earthquake, the day of the tsunami. 3:41 p.m., emergency diesel generators at the Fukushima Daiichi 1 shut down as a result of the tsunami, forcing cooling pumps to start using battery backup. Forcing cooling pumps to start using cooling pumps. The reactors need 4,500 tons a minute each. And there's 1,440 minutes in a day. That's 6,480,000 tons. That's 6,480,000 one-ton pickup trucks. That's a road traffic with 1,000 liters in the back of each of the one-ton pickup trucks. That's a road traffic around the entire planet of 1,000 liters in each pickup. 2,200 pounds per pickup. Wrapped around the entire planet at least once each day. They're going to boil that, and each glass of water, it would typically have 1 billion creatures. So imagine over 400 nuclear plants doing that every day on your planet. Imagine how many species are dying. Eggs and larvae, and the basis of the food chain, the oxygen chain, the carbon sequestering chain. There's 3 running reactors on this site. So that's 19,440,000. That's 3 rows of traffic around the planet every day of 1-ton trucks with 2,200 pounds of water, 1,000 liters of water. Imagine 6,450,000 1-ton pickup trucks wrapped around the entire planet. And imagine how much energy it takes for that water to get into the reactor in a 24-hour period. We're talking about a 24-hour period. So each one is 20 feet long. And so when you do the feet, right, because that's what I've done there, you didn't get to see it, I guess. They're 20 feet long, so that's 388 million feet. And divided by 5,000 is 77 miles. That's wrapped around the planet 3 times. It's an absurd amount we're talking about. So how could batteries power 4,800 tons a minute for each reactor, let alone a line of trucks wrapped around the planet 3 times? Clearly this is a lie, right? TEPCO uses mobile electric generators to help power the cooling system. Remember, this is the 15th. So on the 15th, this is what it looked like. And you had a tsunami run through the site. And so how are you going to use cooling systems when you had reactors detonating, ejecting fuel pools and reactor cores all over the site? You had a tsunami run through the site. You know the damage that's going to happen. How could mobile generators make a difference in that environment? Once one reactor blew up, you can't get near the other ones, and they're going to blow up too. But the world's biggest technical magazine wants you to believe their version is quite telling. The 15th of March 2011, And probably a lot of people may not have seen this picture. This is an unbelievable, iconic picture of somebody that survived a tsunami, and they're just sitting there crying their heart out. And imagine a trauma of just that one person. And they're battered and bruised. And you can see it in their legs. Their legs are brutally bruised from struggling, no doubt, in the tsunami. And just imagine there were school children going to school every day in this environment. Imagine growing up with this as a memory. So now the tsunamis ran out. So how are you going to do anything on this site? You got nuclear fuel rods all over the site, lethal doses that will melt your organs. You got mud and debris and destruction everywhere. You're not going to go in there with any conventional machines. You're not even going to go there with a helicopter. The helicopters couldn't even go near this place. And we're talking about a tsunami, so think of a raging river. Imagine going out in a raging river and walking into the river and trying to do something. It's not going to work, right? But that's the story they want you to believe, is that the Japanese government and TEPCO were trying to, or were working diligently at the site. It simply wasn't true. The Japanese government issued a state of emergency. Officials evacuate thousands of people living within a 3-kilometer radius of the plant. 3 kilometers. Well, you wouldn't be able to explain away dead bodies everywhere and blame it on the earthquake or anything else. They would have to admit that radiation is dangerous. And so they wanted these people moved out of there because they knew the plumes were going to start coming out. They knew it was going to melt down. They had no illusions about it. Saturday the 12th of March. Preparation for air venting from Fukushima Daiichi 1 reactor. How are you gonna do preparations for venting when you have a tsunami run through your site, destroy your site, and then this is what your site would look like? Everything was just torn apart. You weren't preparing for venting. You had no electricity. You didn't have any battery powers. This was all just convenient lies to people who don't know any better. They're the perfect criminals because the average person doesn't have the ability to flush out the lies, right? And so they have to keep telling more lies to cover the other lies. Japanese governments issued a state of emergency. Officials evacuate thousands of people living within a 3-kilometer radius. Officials evacuate thousands of people in a nuclear wasteland. I'm sorry, that's the 12th. They're not venting this. And you remember a tsunami ran through that whole area. It's very difficult to evacuate people from it. Saturday the 12th, preparations for air venting. This is simply not true. Blast and white smoke coming from the Fukushima Daiichi, 3:36 p.m. At 9 a.m., they're preparing for air venting. There was nothing you can do. You lost all power, all telephone poles for 1,200 kilometers. The site is completely dependent on external power. Blast and white smoke comes from the Fukushima Daiichi 1 reactor number 1, blowing off the roof and the upper part of the outer walls. So when you see this explosion, this is not the upper roof and the outer walls. This is the fuel pools getting ejected out of the buildings. And when they come in contact with air, because they need to be underwater or they'll catch fire, and they'll burn at enormous temperatures in just a moment. And what you're looking at is a plume of fuel particulates. And these particulates are splitting atoms. This is the worst case scenario for a planetary system. A planet, rather. TEPCO began venting steam to reduce the growing pressure inside of reactor number 1. Radiation density around the structure rises to the level of 1,015 microsieverts. Look, when this happened, there is nobody can work in that environment. There's no machines can work in that environment, and there's certainly no humans, because your organs will melt in just a few moments. A few minutes, your organs will melt. There's no surgeries, corrective surgeries. There's no mitigation things that could be done to save you. TEPCO begins venting steam. They couldn't, like the building's blown up. You can't vent steam inside of number one. The number one is already blown up. And so suggesting it's 1,015 microsieverts, just call it a millisievert. Why would you call it? See, the number 1,000 sounds like a lot, but when you're talking about microsieverts, it is a lot, but not at a nuclear event. So when you have this kind of event, you're talking about lethal doses. This is lethal doses. And for a very long distance, for tens of kilometers away, this becomes a lethal dose. Density around the structure rises to 1,000 microsieverts. It's an absolute insult. 1,000 sieverts, maybe, but not 1,000 microsieverts. 3 sieverts is a lethal dose. By 648, it falls to 70 microsieverts. There's zero possibility that falls to 70 microsieverts anywhere on the site. There's zero possibilities anywhere on the site it's actually 70 microsieverts today. It's impossible because of the enormous event that took place there. The Japanese government evacuates local residents within 20 kilometers of the plants. Again, they don't want to have a bunch of dead people in the streets and homes that they can't explain away. And it gets blamed on the nuclear, and then the world wakes up to the horror of the nuclear industry. They didn't want to evacuate anybody. They couldn't care less if you dropped dead. They just don't want to get a bad reputation. The Japanese authorities, the same one that moves people back into the nuclear wasteland, prepares to distribute iodine to residents. And all these years that we've covered this, almost a decade and a half, I've never seen evidence of this. I've only seen these connotations a few times on top of that. 8 p.m., this is still the 12th, I'm assuming. TEPCO announces radiation exposure of one employee who was working inside the Fukushima Daiichi 1 reactor building exceeded 100 microsieverts. If you were inside the building when it blew up, you were dead. You don't survive that. And I'll show you the explosion on video, because I think let me get that video for you. There we go. Now you're going to see the explosion here in a second. There you go. Let me go back again. I'm going to zoom in though. Hang on. Oh, I don't have, hang on here. I didn't have any presets for my zoom, so let me hit my preset. Watch the explosion. See that kind of explosion? Does anybody really think somebody got 100 microsieverts in that environment? I'm just going to back it up a little bit. It's hard to comprehend, but these are 19-story buildings, 190 feet, 65-meter buildings. That's a massive explosion. Japan's Nuclear Industrial Safety Agency, NISA, detected cesium. Cesium with an A is a British pronunciation of that word. So this is not Japan, this is British. and iodine. The biggest byproduct of the reactors is corium isotopes. And corium isotopes need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium. 11 p.m., this is still the 12th, TEPCO announced they have been injecting seawater into the reactor core of the Fukushima Daiichi 1 reactor number 1 and then boric acid to absorb radiation. There's zero possibility that anybody is near the building, let alone injecting water in. So what they're trying to do is paint a picture that the reactors are intact. And by saying that the roof is blown off and the side panelings, they're suggesting that the fuel pool is intact. And that doesn't hold any water. If you're an engineer, you'll know the difference right away. I mean, we're on a planet where the world is unbelievably self-centered. It's unbelievably self-centered. It doesn't care about anything. It thinks the world will fix itself as long as they can do whatever they want. That's what the world acts like for the most part. And then to have a big organization telling a story full of lies, so many lies, it's just very disappointing. So I want you to think about the smoke you're looking at. I just want you to appreciate the madness of that statement. So what created the smoke? That's the question you got to ask yourself. So this is the fuel pool. It's full of decades of reactor cores, almost 40 years of reactor cores. If they're exposed to oxygen, they'll catch fire immediately, and they'll burn at enormous temperatures, and they'll release a lot of something that looks like smoke. When you look at the building, you see those big structures at the top. That was added after they were built about 20 years later, and they're just they're ductwork vents. They're for drawing in hydrogen and pushing it up. I would imagine the tall stacks, the skinny stacks. So they're just meant to whisk it out. So there's nothing at the top of the building that could create a giant plume. And when you look at the roof of the building, these are ductworks. They're empty. You can go in there, and I'm not going to say you can walk in it. I don't know if it's strong enough for you to do that. But if it was on the ground, you can walk through it like a tunnel. It's empty. There's nothing in there. And then the top of the building is just steel and panels. So what could cause the emissions, the smoke, something that looks like smoke? The only thing up at the top of the building was and there was a lot, was the reactor core and 2 fuel pools. Each fuel pool would take about 3 reactor cores every decade. And these reactors were 3.5 decades or more older. So there could have easily been at least 8 reactor cores. The fact that they don't have a repository for nuclear waste in Japan or anywhere else on the planet, you would assume even a higher number. So we're assuming we lost 36 reactor cores because that's the logic of the reality of facts, not IEE Spectrum's propaganda. Horrific that they're allowed to write something like that. It's horrific that is allowed to be printed, the lies they told, as you'll see. Sunday the 13th of March 2011, 9:20 a.m. TEPCO completes air venting in reactor number 3 to reduce internal pressure. Well, because reactor 1 had blown up, it's right alongside of reactor, excuse me, reactor 2 and 3 and reactor 4. Because a tsunami has ran through the site, there's nothing that's going to be functional. You're not venting anything. There's nothing functional left at the site. And because you had fuel pools, you had around 8 or 9 reactor cores blown all over the site. You can't go in these buildings anymore, even though the first one is the only one that had blown up at this point. And there's 4 in a row, and on the 15th, which is when the story was written, by the way, 16th rather. So on the 16th, they already knew all of this. And conveniently, those stories don't show you any of these pictures. All the pictures you're going to see are pictures that I'm putting here because their stories, they know, are full of holes the minute they put these types of pictures there. They don't put the names on the stories of who wrote the story. I apologize, I'm not myself tonight. I'm under a lot of stress. Monday the 14th of March 2011, 6:15 a.m. TEPCO reports the Fukushima Daiichi 1 reactor number 3 pressure increases to 530 kilopascals. 500. Now, reactors are typically at 1,000 pounds per square inch. Let me bring this up for you. 530. Something like that. It's 76 pounds per square inch. The industry is actually insane, eh? The industry is actually insane. Number 3 pressure increased to like the reactors are at 1,000 pounds per square inch just to begin with. Telling lies is a full-time job for these people. In reactor number 2, this is the 14th of March. Core coolant levels decreasing and seawater pumping begins, which is simply not true. Pressure decreases in reactor Fukushima Daiichi number 1 to Daiichi 1 number 3 to 450 kilopascals. 11 a.m. a hydrogen explosion. 11 a.m. a hydrogen explosion. Injures 7 workers. TEPCO believes that the reactor containment vessel remained intact. Well, here's the original picture. The reactor is at the top of the building. There's no top to the building. I give you a depiction of what the fuel pool should look like. So that's the original picture. The fuel pool and the reactor core at the very top of the building. So again, you got 500,000 engineers and professionals, and they're the biggest. They have something like 200 journals, academic journals. They produce 20% of the technology on the planet. The IEE Spectrum, who wrote this article, and they cut everybody's throat and every species' throat on this planet. 1:25 p.m. TEPCO confirms the Fukushima Daiichi reactor number 2's cooling system has failed. Still the 14th. The IAEA reported 230,000 units stable. Now the IAEA, which is not a regulatory agency, they don't have any authority. They can't punish anybody on the planet. They're completely volunteer. They're a consulting group with a military-industrial complex, 195 militaries known as United Nations, who are not your friends in any sense or shape. There's not a single shred of evidence that United Nations is anybody's friend. except for the military-industrial complexes. As far as we can tell, they're the enemy of humanity in every sense and shape. Stable iodine distributed to evacuation centers. It's hard to accept that that's true when we've never heard that story anywhere else. 5:17 p.m. on Monday the 14th, TEPCO reported water levels in the Fukushima Daiichi 1 reactor number 2 remained above the fuel rods. Now, how would you know that? How could you quantify that assertion? When reactor 1 and reactor 3, which are on both sides, so on one side is reactor 1 lost its fuel pool, on the other side is Medusa, plutonium mixed oxide reactor. How are you going to know what's going on inside of reactor 2 in the middle? This is why they don't show you pictures. Tuesday, 15th of March, 2011. 6 a.m. TEPCO initiates rolling blackouts. Given reduced power supply, the company reports an explosive sound in the 5th floor of the Fukushima Daiichi reactor number 2. MIT said it was an oil fire and the TEPCO put it out. So this is what it looked like. That's the fire in the top floor. That's the fire in the top floor of reactor 4. So do you think there's a fire in the top floor of reactor 4? Or do you believe that it exploded? Let me just give you a better boo at it. What's going on here? I'm not sure what he's doing. I'm missing something. Just bear with me 1 second here. I'm not sure what's going on there. I'll figure it out some other time. So when you look at reactor 4, which is up in the corner, does it seem reasonable to suggest that there's no fire in the top floor, that the entire building is destroyed? And it's right alongside of reactor 3, which is right alongside of reactor 2 and 1, which also melted down. Blast from the number 2 reactor, buildings of Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant at 6:14 a.m. on the 15th. Now remember, this picture is taken on the 15th. So they had a blast from the number 2 reactor, which is this one. The blast, and this burned constantly for days. We're going to play a song, actually. Okay, I got to take a break here for a minute. For a couple of minutes, and we got a short song. I just got to mark my spots just in case I can't. Because I got to kind of leave my spot to get to the song. So don't worry, it's all good. Just need to mark it so I can find my way back here without too much hesitation. And I was going to play Less Than a Gram, which is what they say got out of the reactors, by the way. Instead, I'm going to play Nuclear Exceptionalism. That's at James Luce's site on YouTube. And I forgot to play a song tonight at the beginning. I'm under a lot of stress. And, we're losing the whole planet. I'm just going to clear my throat, sit back and enjoy this song. I'll be right back after this.
They said it was clean, too cheap to meter. Built the dome, then cooked the beaker. Said the rod was safe as sealed in drums, but left them leaking out of Idaho slums. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear is fun. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear has won. Hallelujah, nuclear exceptionalism is done. They chase the sun, all fusion proud. Ignore the barrels stacked in clouds. Promise stars in every socket, while curium settled in the market. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear is fun. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear has won. Hallelujah, nuclear exceptionalism is done. Chart is clean, while whales rolled up beside the submarine. Blame the algae, blame the rain, but never trace the gamma chain. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear is fun. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear has won. Hallelujah, nuclear exceptionalism is done. Now the rods are rusting, the record spins. Mama warned them, too many sins. Keep your son, keep your lab coat pride, till you fix the waste you tried to hide. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear is fun. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear has won. Hallelujah, nuclear exceptionalism is done.
Nuclear exceptionalism. I love that so much. Such a great song. So this is the 15th. This is the 15th of March. This is day 4. It's to me, it's just unimaginable. So I'm just somebody that's driven to try to do something good. So I work really, really hard. I'm not blessed. I'm not. Everything I do is from brutal amount of hard work and dedication. I just noticed Darlene talking about T-shirts. And yeah, go ahead. More T-shirts the better. You don't have to worry about my shirts. I haven't sold a shirt since Calm Down Charlie launched a huge attack against me. Yoshida Mashada. The more people that make shirts, the better it is. Unit 2, you can see the Higgs signature. That means it's 100% infernal inside of these buildings. These are massive buildings. The average person, unfortunately, doesn't have a scale to work with. And I do have some here that helps articulate it, but I'm not going to go through it because we have so much to get through tonight. Tonight's not the night for that. Maybe I'll try the next show. So we're on the 15th. And a fire breaks out in the Fukushima Daiichi number 4 reactor building. IAEA reported that the Japanese authority believe the IAEA reports. And so the minute they show up when a nuclear accident, their job is to cover it up. And they're the most hideous, most insidious creatures conceivable. They're the definition of a monster in every sense. They have all the attributes of a mass serial killer in overdrive. That spent fuel storage pool is burning, releasing radiation into the atmosphere, which, of course, now they deny that anything burnt, anything caught fire. But when you look at the original footage from I think this was day 11 or something, on the 22nd. That's when he first brought in that cement truck to hoodwink people into thinking the fuel pool was still intact, right alongside the reactor Medusa, reactor 3. And the reason there's a hole in the roof there is because some of the fuel assemblies from the detonation ended up in the turbine buildings. This is why nobody's ever been in there even today. What's crazy about this is later on, they claim they're going inside of reactor 1. And they made the claim quite a few times. And this is almost 500,000 engineers have decided to cut your throats on this planet. And they know you're not going to do nothing about it. Officials asked Japanese residents up to 30 kilometers from the Fukushima Daiichi 1 to stay indoors. Like, you don't stay indoors, you run away. Anything to do with nuclear, you run away. You never, ever listen to these scumbags, these degenerates, these parasites. You never listen to these disgusting maggots under any circumstances. You get out of Dodge and take your pets with you. You're not going back, so take your important stuff with you. TEPCO employees discovered another fire in reactor number 4. TEPCO employee discovered another fire. So suggesting that they were anywhere near the building when reactor 3 is already detonated all over it with fuel rods and fuel assemblies and fuel pellets. There is no TEPCO. When reactor 1 detonated, there was no one going there anywhere near these reactors. They were all covered in massive fuel from the detonations. So the 16th of March, day 5, TEPCO reported that upon inspection, no fires present in the Fukushima Daiichi number 4. So on the 16th, excuse me. Sometimes it's really difficult for me to contain my contempt for this industry. And it's hard to imagine how anybody could not have contempt for everybody in this industry. It's hard for me to wrap my mind around how that would work. Here's a picture. So you got reactor 3. We know we have pictures of it exploding. We have reactor 1 exploding, reactor 3 exploding. They're right alongside of each other. Reactor 2 is in the middle, and reactor 4 is right alongside of it to your left. So here's reactor 3 explosion. It's actually, it actually drops the fuel pool in the reactor cores. It ejected them right out of the building. Sorry here. At the number 4 is present. No fire is present. No, because it cooked off everything at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. 8:30 a.m. on the 16th, TEPCO reported a fog-like steam from Fukushima Daiichi number 3 reactor. That's what they're talking about, a fog-like steam. Well, there is no reactor anymore. The reactor and the fuel pools were ejected right out of the building. This is the number 3 reactor detonating. And you're going to, now this is slower motion. Remember, the buildings are 190 feet tall, almost 200 feet tall. That's the fuel pool in the reactor cores falling back down to Earth on top of reactor 1, 2, 3, and 4 in the common spin fuel pool. There's zero possibility a human is going to survive there in the next dozen years. Zero possibility. Now, when you got 500,000 engineers and scientists and academics and professionals and you know everything you're telling is a lie, what does that make these people, I wonder? So you got unit 1, 2. Now, just because we don't have a video of reactor 4 exploding, even though we have videos 1 and 2 exploding, so why wouldn't you have a video of reactor 4 exploding? Now, reactor 3 and reactor 4, officially, that never happened. Despite the fact I can assure you it happened. And then what does that tell us about the nuclear industry? And what does that tell us about the academics and journalists and universities worldwide? It tells us, unfortunately, that they are the enemy of everybody on this planet and the 8 million species. They are our direct enemies. And how much censorship do I have tonight? I wonder. 14 viewers, really. Did all the medias and universities and institutions and academics and journalists and Greenpeace and the rest of them worldwide conspire to allow Earth to die of radiation poisoning? Because that's what happened to us. We are dying of radiation poisoning. We are being destroyed. And the evidence now is no longer deniable. I wish I had 2 or 3 people to help me do my shows. I can bring you an incredible show. This is a model of Neptunium dispersal based upon 20 days to your top left one, 21 days behind me. This is based on TEPCO's official numbers that doesn't include reactor 3, for instance. It doesn't include the inventories lost from reactor 1, reactor 3, or reactor 4. So the model is based upon a fraction of nothing, of venting basically. And the Neptunium-239, decays to plutonium-239 in 2.5 days. This is quite the puzzle, see? So the ability to work this out on your own, is, if you have no experience, is pretty slim. It doesn't mean you can't. It took me a long time to comprehend. And so just watching one of these shows, these presentations, will give you an incredible amount of insight so you can make informed decisions. So Neptunium. Not plutonium, Dana. Neptunium. And I have a hard time making this screen big because I haven't figured out how to add the buttons to it. I haven't figured out how to add the buttons to it. Just give me a second. Neptunium, right there it is. I don't know why I would forget where Neptunium was. So Neptunium-239 has a half-life of 2.356 days, so 2.4 days. 50% of it is going to decay to plutonium-239. And Plutonium-239 has a half-life of 24,000 years. There's 10 half-lives. So 240,000 years for that. And now plutonium was named after the devil, and appropriately so. So this model, covering the entire planet based upon a fraction of 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 a percent of a percent of a percent. And anthropogenic man-made radiation fallout is the only emitter that will make a plume that covers the planet. These plumes cover the planet. So it's impossible. You didn't breathe it in. Your friends and families and loved ones, your pets, the communities, your country, your planet, everybody didn't breathe it in. It's impossible. And the reason plutonium is so important, because that's a plutonium plume covering the whole planet, based on a fraction of what was actually released. Toxicity of inhaled dioxide, plutonium dioxide, in beagle dogs. 144 beagle dogs. Tumors of the lungs, the skeleton, the liver. So when you get plutonium, you'll get 3 tumors: lung, the skeleton, and the liver. It's a very powerful emission. Bone tumors, 93 dogs were the most common cause of death out of 144 dogs. Lung tumors in 46 dogs were the second most common cause of death. And liver tumors found in 20 dogs were the cause of death in only 2 dogs, and occurred later than the tumors in the bones and the lungs. Tumors in these 3 organs often occurred in the same animal and were competing causes of death. And these findings in dogs suggest that similar dose-related biological effects could be expected in the humans accidentally exposed to plutonium. You weren't accidentally exposed. This was hidden away from you. They worked to hide this away from you. They done it on purpose to you. They are out to murder you, and they are succeeding beyond their wildest dreams, and all the species. But human kidneys are 50 times less efficient than the animal kidneys. So when they make the assertion that the similar dose-related biological effects could be expected in humans, you're actually 50 times more vulnerable than a dog or an animal is. So you're 50 times more likely to die than all the dogs did die. You're 50 times more likely to die. Now, when you got 144 dogs, and this study was by Loveless Respiratory Research Institute in New Mexico, which is the United States Navy. But that's not the worst part of the story, believe it or not. The worst part of the story is that the biggest byproduct, and this is also by the same institution, curium isotopes are the major byproducts in the irradiate. Forget about the alpha, it's the biggest byproduct. And so curium isotopes, every time you hear iodine or cesium, for instance, you'll hear that all the time because that's a nasty isotope, but that's their cover story. Wherever iodine and cesium is, there's going to be at least 100-to-1 ratio of curium isotopes. Curium isotopes need lead shielding 20 times thicker than plutonium isotopes. Plutonium killed all the animals and multiple tumors, and that humans are 50 times more vulnerable than the animal. It really matters. So when the biggest science magazine on the planet that produces 20% of science for the entire planet, that has over 200 journals, is here cutting your throat, guess what that really means? And because nobody's fighting back, only less than 5 people on this planet, you don't have a chance. The cards are not stacked against you. They're going to drop a meteorite on your head, ultimately, And when you're talking about these numbers, you're talking about every species producing radioactive stem cells and radioactive hormones and man-made. Your body's not designed for that. And you're going to be producing so many white blood cells, you would expect to see immediately, and we did, air rage increase, extraordinary crimes, stupid crimes, and stupid stuff to be more prevalent. Criminal acts we've never seen before, and we expect to see certain populations also have a statistical increase post-Fukushima of crimes. We're seeing that. A fog-like steam from Fukushima. First off, look at these reactors. They're completely gone. They ejected their inventories right out of the buildings. And the world's biggest science magazine on the entire planet, with 500,000 scientists, hate your guts and went to war against you and your ability to defend yourself. You couldn't defend yourself because that lie was spread around the world like a plague. So when I put a poll there, did all the medias and universities and academics and scientists and journalists and all the major shakers and movers on your planet conspire to allow Earth to die of radiation poisoning? That's exactly what I mean. It's exactly what I mean. Because the evidence is undeniable. It infuriated me when I seen that. Temperatures in the spent fuel pool of Fukushima Daiichi 1 reactor number 4 rises. Self-defense force considers spraying water from helicopters, but attempt was cancelled. Chernobyl, all 600 pilots died. I can't handle the stress anymore. I'm doing the best I can, but the amount of stress it's unbelievable. We're losing our planet, we're losing everything. All of our loved ones are incredible health issues, and the entities out there that allegedly, Greenpeace or Beyond Nuclear, these are cutting your throats. Their control opposition, their job is to destroy your ability to have a life or a future or anything else. Let me see. Oh. Bear with me. I just don't, you'd think I'd be used to this kind of evil by now. But for some reason, I still can't accept that there's so much evil. Excuse me. It's not fair that these corporations are in a position that they can compromise humanity, and there is no way to hold them accountable. And that anybody that wants to have a conversation is censored as if it doesn't even exist. 16 viewers and 19 likes, 18 votes. it's just like I don't even exist. And I've been doing this straight, 5 days a week for over a decade.
And you know well at Chernobyl, the helicopter pilots that came in and that deposited the heavy materials to try to put down that fire, which was a very different kind of event than what we're looking at now, but still, there were helicopters, and the pilots all died from radiation exposure. Here's a decision question.
So all the helicopter pilots died. If you want to see the rest of that video, you got to come over and go to my playlist. And you see audit of Harvard, MIT, and Stanford University. And so I went through that whole video and extracted their lies, and then I showed the documentation to prove that they lied. And the same thing for MIT and Stanford University. I've done this many times over the years, by the way. And they took down my main site with 24,800 subscribers. And with that said, I was always able to raise enough money to fund expeditions and research. And when I was out on a spider research expedition, because they're missing, and it should be $500,000 per acre, they took down that site. I never ever got an email for it. I never ever got any explanations. The appeal was rejected within 3 minutes. I appealed it and got an email back in 3 minutes and basically told to get lost. It's just sickening that this industry has that ability and has so much contempt for everybody. They will sacrifice the whole planet and every species for whatever project they got going. These are not people. They don't have any human attributes whatsoever. They don't care about anything, clearly, including themselves or their loved ones. All 600 helicopter pilots died, by the way. So, in Japan, that was... they knew it was idiotic, but they done it anyway. And then, because there was so much radiation in the helicopter, they came to their senses. Because now they have cameras, right? Unlike when Chernobyl was happening. And you would have seen helicopters falling right into the reactors, like Chernobyl. But the idea of the helicopter was to make you think that they had it under control, but you can't get something like this under control when it ejected the fuel pools and almost 4 decades of reactor cores right out of the building. A second helicopter flying from the east then dumps his water over reactor number 4 and number 3. The reactors need 4,500 tons a minute. So dumping water on these buildings, and we're talking about this is what the buildings look like. Dumping water on that wasn't going to change the equation. It had already lost their inventories in less than 5 days, which is around 36 massive reactor cores, and each reactor core was probably 100 Chernobyls, because Japan's were pure uranium plutonium. Chernobyl was a graphite reactor. Hi, everybody. And Dana Nasana donated $130 2 days ago. I forgot to mention it last night, and if I don't mention it right now, I'm worried I might not remember to mention it, just so he knows I got it. I think, and of course, Dana's been around forever, and we love Dana. Dana's an incredible soul. And by the way, I've never suggested to Dana how to monitor. I just gave him the tools and let him do whatever he thought was acceptable, because I don't need to tell someone like that, explain to somebody like that. He knows what to do. And he's been around a very long time. He's supported us an unbelievable amount of times. TEPCO patrols reactor number 4 building to inspect the dry cast. TEPCO patrols reactor number 4. Anybody really think that somebody patrolled that building to your left? Also monitors common spent fuel pool. The common spent fuel pool, there was pictures released in 2021. I'll just find you a couple. I got them right here. I'll just find the right picture for you of the common spent fuel pool. I got them. Here we go. So there was 736 pictures. I'd done a video earlier this year. It was called 736 Mystery Pictures. And these were high quality drone pictures. And when I zoomed in on the reactors and the common spent fuel, that's the common spent fuel pool. So you're saying to yourself, well, there's nothing there, Dana. Well, when I zoomed in, this is what I saw, and I couldn't believe my eyes. But this is the common spent fuel pool. It's completely redacted. And behind it, what you're looking at is 45, you're looking at transport truck containers stacked up from the tsunami. This building is right behind, it's on the same street as reactor 1, 2, 3, and 4. It's right across from reactor 4. And it lost all power. And because this pool is overstuffed, it most likely melted down. And that it had windows. It's not a very high building compared to the skyscrapers that are the reactor buildings. And then, why would you pixelate it if it was okay? Right, and there's 736 of these pictures released. And I couldn't believe it when I zoomed in. Here, what I was looking at, I couldn't wrap my mind around. It took me a few minutes to accept that this was I'll just bring up one of the pictures to give you some more context. Hopefully. So this is picture is what it looked like from the drone. So when I was looking at it from the drone, it looked relatively reasonable, right? And there were 736 pictures. And when I zoomed in on it, I was starting to notice pixelation. And the common spent fuel pool would have been right behind me. You can't see it in this picture. But anyway, when you're looking at it, I was clicking through all the pictures and I didn't notice, I was noticing all kinds of things like tsunami debris and everything else. But when I zoomed in and started seeing the damage, I was just, holy smokes. Like, holy smokes. And we had produced quite a few videos about that, and my site was taken down with 24,800 subscribers that I had for almost 5 years. I never gained one, never lost one. So we've had this site for about 3.5, 4 years, and we barely have any subscribers. We barely get any views, and we barely get any people on the live stream that shows up in the statistics. And we do it 5 days a week. And all of these videos are in desperation because we're losing everything. We're going to lose everything. We have all the whales are emaciated, my goodness. If that's not nightmarish and terrifying and horrifying, what actually is? To confirm that the water levels in the pool are secured. So TEPCO patrolled the reactors to see if the water levels in the pool are secured. Well, there is no pool. It was all lost immediately. 10 a.m., and I believe this is still the 16th, radiation levels measured by TEPCO read 400 millisieverts at the inland side of number 3 reactor building. Like, it's absurd to suggest that it's less than a sievert anywhere on that site at that point. It's absurd. and 100 millisieverts at the inland side of number 4 reactor building. So on the inland, which is that way, there's no one going near that. It's because you're talking, we know outside of reactor 1 it was 1 million sieverts. We know those stacks you see there, those vents, the skinny stacks, were at 25 sieverts. The media that is telling you that, the IEEE spectrum, are just revolting, disgusting, and parasites and serial killers. Thursday, March the 17th, 2:11. Self-Defense Force fire engine spray water on reactor number 3, 2 p.m. 5:30 p.m., International Atomic Energy Agency reports that engineers have begun to lay an external grid power line cable to number 2 reactor. IAEA reports that engineers have begun to lay an external grid power line cable to the number 2 reactor. This is madness to even suggest this. The IAEA, the evil of evil, the degenerates of degenerates, engineers have begun to lay an external grid power line cable to the number 2 reactor. So between Medusa, and we know this burnt ferociously for days. They don't show you these pictures because then the story is clearly has no. Yeah, hi everybody. Hi Colette. And Richards can't read something, or I don't. Hi everybody. Let's keep going. It's been just an endless bad day for me. The rare day when I've actually just tried to relax has turned into the worst, literally the worst nightmare I've ever had. It's not even over, unfortunately. So how are you going to lay cable to the number 2 reactor, which is in the middle of 2 Medusas, or it's 3 Medusas, and is a Medusa on its own? Is it like, because when you look up the individual pictures of number 2 reactor, then it looks pretty good compared to the other reactors. But you got to be incredibly evil to write the things they did. And that is the most frightening thing imaginable, to be that evil. Why are these people so hateful, so evil, so insidious, so monstrous? Why are they so evil? Why do they always got to be the worst humans imaginable is the pro-nuclear? Why do they got to be the worst examples of humans? Why is that necessary? Because that's how they got the job. That's who they are by nature. That's who they always were. And that's why they were selected. TEPCO reports that the water levels in the spent fuel pool in reactor 4 is secure. When you look at reactor 4, does that look like it's secure? Like it's so insane. I don't understand what's going on. Just give me a minute, see if I can figure this out. Oh, it's right there. That makes me feel better. Let me fix it, though. I don't know why he's doing that either. At least I can zoom in on the building. Bear with me. So does anybody really think there's any water in that building? Like that cement truck you see over there that's allegedly pumping water into the fuel pool. Like if they had a fuel pool, they would show it. That's a 19-story building. That's a 190-foot building. It's a 190-foot, 65-meter building. There is nothing there. So when they say the fuel pool is secure, and even today they refuse to acknowledge, they vehemently refuse to acknowledge. Let me readjust that for the next time. They vehemently refuse to acknowledge the truth. There we go again. The water levels in the number 4 is secure. Like when you have detonations, you are not going near it. Saturday, the 19th of March, 2011, Tokyo Fire Department's hyper rescue. So Tokyo Fire Department from 240 kilometers away. Hyper rescue sprays more water on the spent fuel pool in number 3. Well, look at number 3. There is no fuel pool. It was ejected right out of the buildings. Now, the fire department, they chose them instead of the nuclear corporations, and they got they had 50-something nuclear power plants. They had all kinds of people they could have brought there, but they all would have said, well, there's no fuel pool. So they brought in the Tokyo Fire Department, who knows nothing about nuclear. This just, again, it shows you how prepared this industry is to be evil. These are not accidents. These are not random things. This was on purpose. When you got 56 reactors, you can bring in thousands of nuclear employees that are familiar with the designs of these sites, right? But if you did, then they would know all the reactors were melted down, all the fuel pools were gone, right? Perpetual evil. That's what we see, and we see it so often in every facet of nuclear industry. It's perpetually evil. Tokyo Fire Department Hyper Rescue sprays more water on the spent fuel pools in number 3, which is absurd to suggest that that happened. It's absurd to suggest that that happened. You can't get near one of the... If just one of those reactors melt down, you can't... Now, we have pictures of them spraying the water. Let me bring that up for a second. I don't want anybody to say, well, Dana didn't provide enough documentation. There we go. This could take a second. Not too long, because there's 1,900 pictures that TEPCO had released. Just such horrible, disgusting people. Here it is. Let me see here. Just the worst humans imaginable is the pro-nuclear community. The epitome of evil. So this is what they're talking. That's a spray of water. It's hard to see in that particular picture. This one's a bit better for you coming up. So that's the trucks. There's actually somebody in there with a stupid paper suit on. And because they don't know any better, they're going to get incredibly sick from that experience. Spraying water from the ocean side of the turbine buildings. Now, each reactor typically needs 4,500 tons a minute. These hoses might do 300 tons a day. The This is salt water on top of that. They got double hoses, but they're not going to reach the reactor. They're spraying, they're sheltered on the other side of the turbine buildings towards the ocean. This was some of the 1900 pictures that were released. This is what they were talking about, spraying water. This water is not going to hit the reactors. It's never going to get near the reactors. And just bear with me, I might have even one more or two more better pictures to help articulate why I'm going to make those assertions. Unlike everybody else, I show documentation for everything. I don't hide away from anybody. And I don't pretend anything. The idea is to show you the documentation so you can make your own decisions. I got some more pictures, but I don't think I got the right pictures I'm looking for. I got 1900 pictures, and so I'm not sure exactly where the pictures I'm thinking of are in the 1900 pictures. And you know how long it takes some of these pictures to load up before you can actually view them on my side, and then import them so you can view them on your side. Okay, so I'm not gonna keep looking, but I will show you some more pictures from that same. So this is them spraying water from the turbine side building, the ocean side, over the turbine building towards reactor number 3. And most of this is remote control. Once they set it up, they run away, right? I hope that wasn't happening on your side. Some crazy flashing going on there that time. So they're on the ocean side trying to spray water, and this is the idea was to get these pictures so that the world thinks that the industry has it under control. That's all this was about. There was no useful application to what they're doing. It's just a dirty, rotten industry. It's perpetually corrupt. And they have no conscience, these people. Let me just delete these pictures because they're hard on the system. Unless I reduce them, right? 278. So bear with me, I'll come back up to 278. 268, 278. Fire Department, Tokyo Fire Department, Hyper Rescue. Here we go. Again. Now I put a new security in there tonight before I went live, about 5 minutes before I went live. I have 1.5 gigawatt upload and 1.5 gigawatt download speeds, gigawatts. 1,500 megabytes up, 1,500 megabytes down. And YouTube only needs 5.6 megabytes. So why is that happening when I'm showing you the most important and vital information? I don't know, Dana. And it's so weird that it happens at that moment when I'm showing you the really good stuff. This is what always happens to me. Saying I only got one person in the chat. So there's only one person in the chat, is it, folks? Let's keep going. I'm just going to keep my eye on the comments section for a few minutes to make sure everybody's getting a good and I'm still streaming reasonably. Saturday, 19th March, Tokyo Fire Department, we already covered that. So reactor 3, by the way, the fuel pool's reactor core is at the top of the building. You can't spray water into a fuel pool when it was ejected out of the building and doesn't exist anymore. Does that make any sense to anybody? Saturday, the 19th of March, 2011. All shrimp are radioactive because they're bottom feeders and the radiation destroyed species end up on the bottom and the bioaccumulates. James not seen any glitches. Colette said it sounds fine. Let's keep going. And Medusa is right in the middle of multiple reactors and 36 reactor cores melting down in a total of 8 fuel pools. So they sacrificed those poor firemen, right? TEPCO reports that it has made 3 holes. You like this story, folks? 3 holes in the roof of reactor 5 and 6, which are quite, not too far, but they're quite a distance away. And we got pictures from the drone. And that's reactor 6, and that's reactor 5. I don't see the holes in the roof of reactor 5. And reactor 6 is completely pixelated. So why is reactor 6 completely pixelated? Why did they block out reactor 6 in the turbine building 2? And that's an interesting statement, though, that they had punched holes in the roof of reactor 5 and 6. Because there's no evidence of holes on top of those buildings. And you would imagine they would have got footage of that. The heroic men are up there with their axes chopping holes in the top of reactor 5 and 6. Ha ha. Again, it just doesn't add up. That's the 19th of March, by the way. Sunday, March 2011, 8 a.m. Radiation levels have been measured 500 meters from number 3 reactor building. This morning, the level was 2.6 millisieverts, 2,625 microsieverts. See, by using 2,625, it sounds like a lot to anybody who don't know the difference when it comes to nuclear accidents. But you wouldn't measure the numbers there in microsieverts or millisieverts, you would measure it in sieverts. Right, because you ejected the entire inventories out of the buildings. As reported, the Deputy Director General of Nuclear Industrial Safety Agency. So this corruption is beyond any concept of reality. The corruption is beyond any rationale whatsoever. It's just a filthy, evil, degenerate, monstrous-ridden industry. An industry of nothing but gobblish, ghoulish, cowardly chicken necks and skinks. It's an industry of nothing but the most hideous, monstrous, odious, insidious. Like really, you can't, it's grotesque. Untrustworthy and hideous and nefarious and contempt for everything on the planet. And they're not supervillains. They're terrorists. They're swindlers. They're just shady, heinous, repugnant, repulsive, perpetually sadistic, evil scum. That's what these people are. They're disgusting, right? And they're shameless. They don't care. They're the result of so much inbreeding from the employees, from the pro-nuclear community employees, and that their parents done the same thing their entire lives. The 20th of March 2011, Self-Defense Forces uses fire engines to spray water on reactor 4. Self-defense forces are using fire engines to spray water on reactor 4. Again, I'm having a hard time comprehending that. That's one side of reactor 4. I'll give you another version of reactor 4 from the other side. That's the other side. If you're looking that way, you're looking towards the ocean. And look down on these buildings. That debris is still there today. I mean, when you look at this side, you know, right? You know there's nothing left. That's the other side, the opposite side, I do believe. 3:46 p.m. TEPCO finishes laying cable 2 and starts providing power to reactor number 2. Really? The International Atomic Energy Agency reports that off-site electrical power has been connected to an auxiliary transformer and distribution panel. So they're saying that off-site power has been ran to the site, which is absurd to suggest that it is, and that electrical power has been connected to an auxiliary transformer and distribution to the number 2 reactor. So they ran power in the middle of massive, unprecedented meltdowns and inventories. Like each of the buildings had at least 9 reactor cores. This is insane. The story is insane. To suggest that they ran power, it's insane to suggest they connected power to anything. But this is what they're doing. TEPCO had injected March the 20th, day 9. TEPCO has injected some 40 tons of seawater into reactor 2. Like, how are you going to inject water into number 2 when the site got washed through with a massive tsunami at 400 miles per hour? There's debris and mud, and the infrastructure's all been torn apart. It's dependent on external power. We know in hindsight the bottom of these stacks is 25 sieverts. So imagine how bad the buildings actually are. We know we have numbers of over 1 million sieverts. 3 sieverts will kill you pretty quickly. 1 million sieverts is like a sniper round. There is zero possibility. And then you've seen the redacted pictures of the roads and the buildings were completely pixelated out because there was lethal doses dropped everywhere on the site. March 21st, self-defense forces and the United States Army fire engines spray more water into reactor number 4, finishing at 4 a.m. They sprayed more water into it, really. Really. Is there anybody out there that's so gullible they believe that? How can you ever, for 1 second, tolerate this industry? How can you not demand that this industry be held accountable for these lies and for all the other crimes against humanity and the 8 million species that is now, they're exterminating every species on the planet right now because of this. But I mean, you got 80 years of emissions from 1,000 fuel pools on top of that. All the fuel pools are still splitting atoms into your environment. It breaks my heart all day, every day. 9 a.m. TEPCO reports it has a 450-volt cable connected to the plant and is ready to supply a central control room for the number 1, number 2 reactors. This is madness, boy. Just hang on for a sec. Let me see if I can find some stuff for you. They can't open their pie holes without being evil. It's simply impossible for them to be even a subhuman. It's impossible for them. me show you what a tsunami looks like anyway. And I already showed you the water running through the site. It was a torrential. So the damage, you can see what kind of damage a tsunami leaves behind, right? So let's put that into context. If the tsunami ran through Fukushima, everything's okay. If it runs through anywhere else, it destroys everything. Right? It annihilates everything. Unless it runs through Fukushima, then everybody's running around, driving around. Durka, durka, durka. Let's bring in the Tokyo Fire Department. Let's put some water on that fire. It's just a fire. It's not a nuclear meltdown, Dana. It's just a fire. And you got to go in between Medusas and connect power, are you? Really? I'm furious today. And when you look at the heat signature, this was first week heat signature of this building. The interior of it is a raging inferno. It cooked off 9 reactor cores in that building, in the fuel pools and the reactor core, and a lot of it went down deep into the earth. You can never go near the building or in the building, despite what they're going to try to tell you. It's the truth. We have hindsight, we have documentation, we have a dedication now of 14 straight years of aggregating the documentation, and we have absurd amount of documentation. There's nobody, I highly suspect there's probably nobody outside the nuclear industry has a better collection than I do. I can't imagine anybody with a better collection than what I've gathered up, because I'm relentless. TEPCO employees spot a light grey smoke rising from the southeast side of the rooftop of reactor 3. The rooftop of reactor 3. Let's see if we can spot any slight smoke from the rooftop of reactor 3. Can you spot it? I can't spot it. I'll have to zoom in and have a look here. Let's see. The rooftop. Does anybody know where the roof is? I think it traveled about 2 miles straight up when it blew up, but let's pretend like we're the nuclear industry and that the roof is actually there. So where is the roof, first off? Remember, this is an 19-story building, 65-meter building, 190-foot building. Where's the roof at the top of this building? Where is the roof at the top of that building? Show me the roof on top of that building, and I'll burn all my equipment on the live stream. I'll burn the boat. I'll burn everything I got. All my computers. I'll burn everything. And I'll live stream it as it's happening. We'll have a big celebration. We'll get popcorn. It's going to be a good time. You can bring your families. But if I'm right, and that roof doesn't exist, the rooftop of reactor number 3, I blotted that out. Let's go backwards. The rooftop of reactor number 3 building. Well, it's number 3 that they're talking about anyway. There is no number 3. Oh, I see. Hang on a second. That's the screen that I got for that one. Let me just fix that. I got that choked off. Yeah, there you go. Reactor number 3. That's reactor 3. There is no roof. I'm not sure if that's if that's the 14th or the 15th of March. But I'm pretty sure there's no roof there. Does anybody see a roof there in the comment section? Anybody want to correct me? No, Dana, the roof is right there. Open you to knock the shit out of your eyes, Dana. You can't see the roof. What are you, stupid? Give it to me, man. Mom, Dana can't see the roof. He's a scam artist. There is no roof. Ooh, you're not allowed to say that. Nuclear industry will be coming for you in the morning. How dare you say there's no roof? You traitor to the nuclear industry. Oh, wait, no, that's Don. Don's not a traitor. Rooftop of reactor number 3. How come I can't see the rooftop? Is it invisible like reactor 4 and reactor 1? Where's the rooftop? TEPCO reports that the radioactive material were detected from the seawater around a discharge canal south, really south. Have you seen the explosions? Of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power station, according to the perpetually evil scum of the earth IAEA. Well, in Canada and United States, it was 1 million and 10 million atoms per cubic meter of air, 6,000 miles away. But they found a little bit alongside, south of the building, Dana. Oh, okay. We found a lot in Canada, United States, and of course that's only day 8, which is appropriate for this story, which is the same day, which is right here. Actually, this is the 23rd. And that's this story, by the way, let me go backwards. March the 22nd to the 23rd, right? So this is what it looked like from cesium-137 at 1 million to 10 million atoms. The French government study a spike in radiation. It's not a model. It's documentation. So the whole planet was almost covered at this point, but there wasn't much in Japan. It was just south of the buildings, Dana. Oh, okay. Thank goodness for that. The color of the smoke, this is not smoke. This is melted reactor cores from number 3, changed to somewhat white and slowly dissipating. Yeah, because you cooked off the entire inventories of over 30 plus years. You ejected it right out of the building, for goodness sakes. And so this is 22nd of March. A cement pumping vehicle sprayed water on reactor number 4. And you can see it to your left there. A cement pumping truck. So they parked it and ran away, of course. Whoever done that, we have pictures of people in paper suits. So they were dead that afternoon or shortly after. The industry is so evil, it doesn't know how to be anything else. It's never been anything else. It has always been the ultimate in evil. 10:45 p.m. By this time, TEPCO reports that electricity supply, I'm going to love this one, from external sources restored to reactor 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. They even turned the lights on, Dana. So they restored power to, say, reactor 3, did they? Do you know how insane that is? You know how incredibly insane it is just that they return power to that building on the, is that the 22nd or 23rd? 22nd. TEPCO reported that the electricity supply from an external source restored number 1 to number 6, and that the lights were turned on in the mail operation room and the reactor number 3 main control room. The main control room for that reactor, why would you restore power to that for when there's nothing left? And the reality of it was they still haven't went inside that room even today, the so-called control room. Are these not the most worthless humans we've ever come across as the nuclear industry? Are they not the worst examples of what a human is? Are they not worse than every serial killer combined in history and every jail on the entire planet? Each of these people. Did all the medias and universities, etc., worldwide conspire to allow Earth to die of radiation poisoning? Because we didn't even try to deal with this. We pretended that they were dealing with it. We didn't send in 1 million nuclear scientists, which would have been the best thing we could have done, because they would all be dead right now, and that would be the best thing could happen to this planet. They should have been forced in at gunpoint or dropped out of a plane and smothered a fire with hundreds of thousands of dead nuclear scientists. That would have been the most appropriate thing to do. So they restored power to all of these buildings on the 22nd. Praise the Lord. Man, oh man, thank goodness. I have a butterfly that's been living in my garden now for a couple of months, and I can't mow the lawn because the butterfly is there. And you got all the dandelion flowers, right? And that's where the butterfly is hanging out. And it's so rare to see anything, any life at all. I just can't bring myself to cut the lawn. Not that I'm very healthy anyway. The industry has no concept of how lucky they are that I'm not healthy. They really don't. I don't think most people realize what would happen if I was healthy. This industry would definitely regret a whole bunch of stuff, I can tell you that much. Tuesday, the 22nd of March, 2011. TEPCO reports electricity supply from external sources were restored to reactors number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Hallelujah. They restored power to all the reactors that don't even exist. I'd say that's a miracle. That's a miracle. If you restore power to that, that's nothing shy of a miracle. Whoever done that should be the next president of Jupiter and Mars. TEPCO injected more seawater into the spent fuel in reactor number 3, Dana. So there's a spent fuel at the top of that building now. Does anybody not think this is outrageous? This is just unprecedentedly outrageous. And I noticed all the pro-nuclear didn't call in and correct me tonight. That's convenient. Thank goodness for that. I was worried about that. The pro-nuclear would call in and correct me. No, Dana, you got to have special glasses to see the fuel pool. Don't you know that, Dana? What are you, stupid, Dana? Yeah, I am stupid. Of everything but nuclear. Nuclear is the only thing I'm actually any good at. That's not good for nuclear, is it? I'm just doing the best I can. I know I'm not perfect or even close to it. I know that. I get that. IAEA published slides. A few tongue twisters for me at this stage. With overview of each reactor's status, Dana. Oh, yeah, I know, yeah. You can look it up yourself. Summary of reactor unit status at 24 March. The degenerate international disgusting parasitic atomic energy agency. They are despicable, eh? They're just despicable people. I don't think they're actual people, personally. They're despicable, subhuman, though, whatever they are. They put up that, but they don't show you any pictures. They're not going to show you that picture. No, we were at the top of the building the other day, Dan. Everything's good. Okay. So what's going on here? Richard can't see Don. Don can't see Richard. Is that what's going on here? I don't know what's going on here. Let me check this out first. There's Richard, and there's Don. I can see both of them in one window pane. Richard, meet Don. Don, meet Richard. I don't see it, but apparently they can't see it. Apparently they can't see the comments of each other. Thanks a lot, dear nuclear industry. Power supply restored to common spent fuel cooling system. So the common spent fuel pool never had any power for how long? If it doesn't have power for a few hours, it'll start to melt down. It'll start to viciously overheat anyway in a few hours. After 7, 8, 9, 10 hours, it's gonna start breaking down. Once the water is gonna boil. It's gonna boil within a couple of hours because you are storing reactor cores from all 6 reactors. And these reactor cores are hot for millions of years. And so it's going to boil off the pool if you can't add water to it. So then the question is, why is the pictures that weren't released until 2021 all pixelated of the common spent fuel pool? Why did they do that? And nobody knows why they released these pictures or who released them on the 10th year. Not the 10th anniversary itself, but in January of that year. I found these pictures at a translated story from China. And there was a bunch of links to a TEPCO archive. And I went there, and all those pictures were released that day, and they were in compressed files. And so I think there was 10 packages. So I downloaded all 10 packages and unpacked them, and I had 736 pictures. And when I zoomed in, this is what I was looking at: redacted pictures of all the reactors and reactor 6 and the common spent fuel pool, and another massive area up by the main gate, which is, excuse me, which is west of the site. That's the common spent fuel pool. Why is that redacted? It's right across the street from reactor 4, by the way. It's on the same street as all the reactor 1, 2, 3, and 4 that detonated and lost the fuel pools and all their inventories. But the entire building and its ground is completely redacted, pixelated out. That's quite interesting, isn't it? That's quite the abnormality, I would imagine. $120 tons of seawater was injected into reactor number 3 spent fuel pool via the cooling and purification lines. Well, there is no purification lines. There is no spent fuel pool at the top of reactor 3. And we know that because in 2012, this picture came out, and the building is completely gone. And yet in 2021, they said they were getting the fuel out of the spent fuel pool of this building, which is the Medusa, the plutonium X oxide reactor. Friday, the 25th of March, 2011, Japan's chief cabinet secretary, one of the lowest forms of life, Idano, holds a press conference later on Friday to advise residents between 20 to 30 kilometers from Fukushima, Daiichi number 1, to consider voluntarily evacuating because they didn't want to be responsible And they knew they should go, and they wanted them to go because they didn't want dead bodies to show up with no way to explain it away, only radioactive fallout. I mean, these are horrible, these are monstrous entities. These are the lowest forms of life conceivable. Like that disgusting parasite, Yoshida Mashada, who stalked me for over 10 years, 12 years basically straight. TEPCO injects seawater in a reactor number 4 spent fuel pool using fuel pool cooling and filtering systems at reactor 4. That's pretty cool. Only problem is reactor 4 doesn't exist. Here's another picture in 2012 of reactor 4. And so the spent fuel pools are at the top of the building. So where's the top of the building? And look at the bottom of the building. Look at the debris hanging out of the building symmetrically. Right, there is no building. It's just, the industry is so evil for so long, it's just natural for them. And because the world is not aware, we're going to lose our planet. Too sweet. We've already lost the majority of the species post-Fukushima in just 14 little years. All the gray whales, for instance, that are left, 14,000 have died post-Fukushima. Only 13,000 are left, and all of them are starving to death or severely emaciated on top of that. You see the peanut heads, the shoulder blades, their spines sticking out, their rib cages. They're complete. They have no blubber, no fat whatsoever. And that's what they were like last year on the 12,000 migratory routes north, and they had no surviving babies. This year, they're even more emaciated. And because they're the second biggest mammal on the planet, they were able to survive for this long. But that's it. They've been dying in droves post-Fukushima. And so we're seeing the same thing with the humpback whales and the killer whales and the fin whales and the culvert beak whales, etc., etc., etc. And the seals and the sea lions and the seabirds, severe emaciation. And you can't just blame it on garbage can diagnosis the industry throws out there. And look at all the lies that they've told you tonight, the perpetual lies that we've covered tonight. These are extraordinary amount of lies. These are extraordinary lies. You ain't doing nothing at number 2. You can see the heat signature. That was their official. That was the official release from a drone. The heat signature of reactor 2. You are not going. This is a nuclear reactor building with 9 reactor cores. And the 2 fuel pools had 8 reactor cores in the reactor. And on each side of it is multiple reactor cores melted down. 1:28 p.m., the Kawasaki City Fire Department sprays water on reactor number 4 spent fuel pool, reactor number 4. Well, here's a picture you'll never see anywhere else. I'll get it out of the way in case you want to get it. Well, it doesn't matter, really. I'll get it out of the way. Of all 4 sides of reactor 4, does anybody really think there's a fuel pool in that building? Now remember, in 2012, that's what it looked like to your left. The fuel pools are at the top of these buildings. Can you spot the fuel pool at the top of the building to your left? No, of course not, Dana. The 26th of March, 2011, TEPCO tests radiation levels in reactor number 2's basement's water level. How are you going to test the radiation levels in the basement of a building surrounded by multiple nuclear reactors melting down and inventories of fuel pools lost and detonated all over the site, and the confirmation that reactor 2 has already melted down and lost its 8 reactor cores in the 2 fuel pools also? If that doesn't make you sick and have nothing but contempt for journalists and academics, particularly scientists, how can you ever, under any circumstances, trust a scientist again? How the hell does that actually work? The light in the main control room of reactor number 2 turns on 4:46 p.m. These people are actually insane. When you sprayed that whole area with radioactive fuel particulates and pellets, nobody's going in there. TEPCO workers find water in the trenches of reactor building number 1, 2, and 3, and the radioactive emissions at the surface of the water was, this is absurdness, 0.7 millisieverts an hour for reactor number 1. When I read that, if there had been a nuclear scientist anywhere near me, I probably would have pulled his head right off or her head off their shoulders. I should call it it. I have zilch respect for anybody in the nuclear industry. Zilch. TEPCO detects plutonium in soil surrounding the plant. Company says the density 0.27 and 26 becquerels per kilogram of dry soil of plutonium-236, 240 is 2 out of 5 samples. Is equivalent to the fallout observed in Japan from atmospheric nuclear tests imposed no major impact on the human health, the IAEA notes. Okay, but here look at some other headlines that we have about that. They found plutonium in every sample. It's in every sample. Health physicists in the United States worry about inhaling hot particles from Fukushima, and so they should. High concentrations of hot particles, plutonium and americium, high concentrations in the United States and Canada. Yet they're saying traces of plutonium are not uncommon because of atmospheric nuclear testing. How can you have nothing but contempt for people that lie like that? How can you have nothing but hatred? How does that actually work? How can you pretend that nothing got into this building? How does that actually work? How do you tell somebody you're a scientist after you lie like that? How does that work? How does that person, they make a lot of money, they drive nice cars, beautiful homes, probably got nice families, but they're the epitome of the evilness that is destroying humanity and the species, and that no one, only a small handful right here, are willing to fight for. You got every media and every university on the planet busy cutting your throat. How can you call that a society? How can you call that not what it is? Evil beyond any kind of description. It's evil. Because that affects every species on the planet. This is not a game. And everybody gets caught up in their own personal little tiny world, and they don't care about anything else, only their own personal, idiotic, little tiny world. And it's not their fault. They're socially engineered to be that way so they don't become articulated and understand that they're not on this planet to satisfy their own stupid egos. They're here to fight for the 8 million species and the future of humanity, and they have an obligation. Lights in the main control room of reactor number 4 building are turned on. Now all of the control room lights are on. Ha, they're all on. Oh, joy to the world, the control lights are all on. Whoever wrote this story is, they don't put their name on these stories because they don't want the story to come back. They don't want to, they probably don't even want to remember they wrote these stories. They're so, they're capable of feeling shame, but it won't stop them from being evil. Motor-driven pump starts injecting fresh water into reactor number 2. How are you going to inject water into a building with 100% meltdown of non-reactor cores? How are you going to get to it when you're surrounded by multiple nuclear reactors melting down? And a total of 36 reactor cores and 8 fuel pools and reactors melted down. How are you going to get in that environment again? You don't. It's disgusting. It's disgusting what they've done to us. And they're continuing to do to us. It's the most cowardly thing in human history. There's no precedence for this kind of cowardness. TEPCO employees spot smoke coming from power panels in reactor number 1 building. The power panel supplies electricity to the water pump motor. This is just pure madness. TEPCO employees spot smoke coming from the power panels in the number 1 building. Coming from the panels of that building closest to us, is it? Really? Where 8 reactor cores actually detonated in the fuel pool. The fire department investigates. Why would a fire department investigate a nuclear meltdown? Because nuclear scientists won't go there, Dana. Because nuclear scientists are not stupid. The fire department are. They don't know nothing about nuclear, so why would they even go there? Because they clearly knew nothing about it, they would never go there. Imagine how evil you got to be to send a fire department in there. Not nuclear academics, nuclear companies, or nuclear experts, but fire department. Investigates at a nuclear meltdown. Really. You worthless, disgusting parasites on this planet. You're just parasites, that's all you people are in this industry. The fire department investigates, Dana. Smoke stops after TEPCO does a voodoo dance. Cuts power to the panel. You really think there's a panel in that building? Suggesting there's power to the building, folks. I apologize, I get passionate about losing our fucking planet. Media continues to question if there's been a breach of a pressure vessel in any of the Fukushima reactors. Media continues to question if there's been a breach of a pressure vessel in any of the Fukushima reactors. Yeah, we lost our planet. As soon as the nuclear industry showed up, by the looks of it, common sense was socially engineered out of the population, and anybody with a dissenting voice was ostracized from the planet. So, explain to me that statement about reactor 3, for instance. How can you said there's, like, the containment is at the top of the building, not the bottom of the building. That's reactor 3, for instance. It's just one of the reactors. But to suggest that nothing got out of these buildings, when so much information, like these pictures came from TEPCO's website, for goodness sakes. He believes that all of the cores have melted. Now, this was an interesting statement. This was an unusual statement. This was Richard Leahy, former chair of nuclear engineering at the Rheinschlager Polytech Institute, clarifies, I butchered that name, I know, so sue me, clarified previous statements in an interview with the IEEE Spectrum, the scum of the earth, by the way. He believes that all cores have melted, and the reactor number 2 core may have melted through. That may have, but that's a rare admission, isn't it? That's an extraordinary admission. So let me save that part. We don't really get these statements very often, so let me save that into my pile of bizarre. Somebody actually acknowledged it. How can you suggest that this didn't happen? It's easy. You couldn't get the job if you weren't willing to suggest it didn't happen. Nuclear Industry and Safety Agency, NISA, said radiation in the seawater 330 meters, 1,000 feet south of the plant has risen 4,385 times maximum safety levels. A rise from the previous high of 3,355 times that was detected on Tuesday. President Sarkozy of France is chair of the G20 and G8, flies to Japan to show unity with the nation. Really, that's going to show unity. And of course, Sarkozy, one of the worst humans besides Macron I've ever seen. TEPCO reprimanded for sending teams of workers into the Fukushima plant without supplying paper suits. Some work groups entered with only one worker having been issued a dosimeter. Well, these are not workers. These are homeless and destitute and victims of society, immigrants who don't speak the language. TEPCO said it detected levels of radioactive iodine, and I despise that every time I hear it, by the way, in seawater samples taken near the plant that are 5 million times the maximum concentration allowed by law. Company officials said the samples taken on the 2nd of April showed the figure at 7.5 million times the limit. Why would you talk about iodine when the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rod is the curium isotopes, by the way? You worthless. Because when people look it up, they see a short half-life for iodine versus the curium isotope, which is the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rods. And I showed you that evidence earlier from a study from United States Navy, Loveless Respiratory Research Institute, New Mexico. TEPCO, Monday, the 4th of April. I wonder what April 1st was. Right, the clown day. TEPCO announced plans to release more than 11,500 tons of what it's calling low-level radioactive wastewater into the Pacific Ocean. So April the 4th, how can you have low-level on a site that was peppered with 36 reactor cores detonating and melting down? How does that actually work, I wonder? How do you get low-level radioactive wastewater? And where were you storing it? And if you stored it anywhere, you wouldn't have access to that site. There is no such thing as a low-level radioactive wastewater at a nuclear meltdown, and certainly Fukushima. They were saying this because they didn't want to try to account for the missing water. But it gets actually worse. Like, what they've done is unconscionable. And thank goodness that we're telling this story so that at least we know of this particular lie. And this was absurd lies. The water contaminated with radiation due to the still mysterious leaks. Does that look like a mystery to you? How can you call a mystery leak when it looks like that? How can you call it a mystery leak when it done that? How can you call it a mystery leak when it covered the whole planet in less than 30 days? In every study from every institution worldwide that covered it. You coward industries. You industry of worthless, disgusting, parasitic humans. You disgusting maggots. You revolting maggots. You scumbags. Is being dumped to make room in the plant storage tanks. What storage tanks? What are you talking about? You can't reuse the tanks even if it was true. For more highly radioactive water. You can't pump it out. You can't connect it. You can't do any of this. These are lethal doses everywhere. Which had pulled in the basement of several of the reactor turbine buildings, which are on the ocean side. Like, there's zero possibility you're taking something out of the turbine buildings. It's zero possibility. Because we know of fuel assemblies that went right down through the roof of those buildings. I actually showed you some of that earlier. As TEPCO, they still have never been in those buildings 14 years later. As TEPCO undertakes its planned release of contaminated water into the ocean, it tries, without success, several schemes to stem the flow of highly radioactive water from as yet undiscovered source that is pouring out of a 20-centimeter long crack. This is madness to even suggest in the seawater intake area for number 2. This is madness to suggest that that's where the water is a 20-inch crack when the buildings don't even exist, when the buildings are completely destroyed. You worthless scum, man, that done this. You're just worthless scum that done this. Undiscovered source that is pouring out of a 20-centimeter long crack. I think there should be a 20-centimeter crack in everybody's head that wrote these stories. TEPCO injects 6,000 cubic meters of nitrogen gas into reactor number 1. Really? There's no building there, no roof on the building. The building is torn apart and melted down. There was 9 reactor cores melted down. In an effort to thin the concentration of hydrogen and prevent an explosion. Now, how could you, in the name of goodness gracious, eject anything into any of these buildings? How could you get close to any of these buildings? How does that actually work? You horrific, you disgusting, horrific parasites. And I apologize because I get a little descriptive. Damaged building housing reactors in the first few days following March 11th. In the first few days, they went there, did they? And they injected. Really? The reactors never stopped blowing up until day 6. On the 7th of April, NISA reported that the quake caused trouble at several other nuclear facilities in the region. And the Roscasco spent fuel reprocessing plant, which is like 30 years old, they still haven't got it complete, by the way. They are storing fuel there, though. Temporarily lost their off-site power feeds and had to rely on emergency diesel generators to keep the spent fuel storage pools cool. They have spent fuel storage pools there, but they don't have the reprocessing plant is nowhere near finished even today. And they spent so many billions of dollars. Radioactive water spilled from a spent fuel pool at the Onagawa power plant during the quake. Well, ain't that an interesting statement? Tuesday, the 12th of April, the Japanese government raised the severity ratings of the Fukushima disaster to a 7 on the International Atomic Energy Agency's severity scale. Really, it took you until the 12th of April. It took you 30 days. 30 days. This is, each reactor is 100 Chernobyls. They're pure uranium, pure plutonium. They're massive reactor cores. Chernobyl was a small reactor. It was a new reactor. It was a graphite reactor. Each of these reactors are at least 100 Chernobyls. There's 36 reactors times 100. There's 3,600 Chernobyls. Minimum. We know that there's at least 6 reactor cores stored in the pools each decade at each building, according to the inventories exchanges that we know we have documented. Severity scale, the highest rating possible. Like, clearly the International Atomic Energy Agency is the worst thing can ever happen to a planet. They're the worst humans imaginable. They're the most low-life forms of humans we've ever come across. Suggesting nothing got out of these buildings is unconscionable. We can't have a future because all the medias and universities and everybody else worldwide conspired to allow Earth to die from radiation poisoning. That's the brutal reality that we live in. Excuse me, my voice is shot at this stage. How long have we been streaming? Oh, we're a little bit over the normal time. We haven't got that much more to go. We might as well finish it out. We want to get through this whole story tonight. And I already pre-done everything that I could theoretically do before I got to the studio. Change puts the incident on par with the 1986 accident at Chernobyl. To even suggest that Chernobyl is any even remotely close to the severity of Fukushima is outrageous. Chernobyl was brutal worldwide. They closed 9,400 farms in Ireland, Scotland, and the United Kingdom, for goodness sakes. Comparing Chernobyl to Fukushima's single reactor. What looks worse, Chernobyl or Fukushima? I would, like, Fukushima reactors, at each building was 9 reactor cores minimum. Probably 12 and 14 in some of them. There's 4 reactor buildings lost those types of inventories. Each of the reactors are pure uranium, pure plutonium, and Chernobyl was a graphite. Chernobyl was a new reactor 2 years old. Chernobyl was a very small reactor core. So in comparison, these are a 100-to-1 ratio, each reactor core. So you're talking 800 or 900 reactor cores per building versus Chernobyl, of the animosity equivalent of a Chernobyl graphite reactor. TEPCO officials outline a plan to achieve a cold shutdown of Fukushima within 9 months. The utility's first phase efforts will include removing 60,000 tons of contaminated water, installing so-called stable cooling circulation systems, and halting the release of radioactive dust and water to the air and sea. It covered the whole planet. This is the French government on April the 5th, which is around the same timeline, is it? April. It's 26th of April. This is the whole planet in 23 days. Of 1 million to 10 million atoms of cesium-137, that's the only one they acknowledge, per cubic meter of air. It's covering the entire planet. And this is based on a spike in radiation from the French government. So this is not an opinion, this is not a model, this is not a conjecture. This is brutal fact. And this is a catastrophic isotope that pulses energy 600 feet every second by the atom. So an atom, you can put 200 million atoms on the head of a needle, but you can't see it. Six hundred feet every second, and you can't see it. 600 atoms every second, and you can't see it. Or 600 feet pulse of energy. So it destroys chromosomes, the DNA, the cells of every species within 600 feet, and you have an invisible snowstorm covering the entire planet. TEPCO sends a remote control robot to check the #1 reactor for water leaks. Really? You sent a robot in there, did you? How can you not hate this? Everybody in this industry? How does that actually work? And how do you rationalize that? Tuesday, the 3rd of May, TEPCO reports that workers will enter #1 reactor building. Really? You're going to go in the... You're going to go in the #1 reactor building. No, not going to. They did, Dana. Somebody take you to that building. They'll claw the eyes out of you before you can get them near it. TEPCO reports that workers will enter the #1 reactor building to install filtering equipment for removing 95% of the radioactive dust from the air inside the building. And so when you see my poll, for instance, did all the media and universities and academics worldwide conspire to allow Earth to die of radiation poisoning? Yeah, that's exactly what they done to you. They made sure that there would be no way, because they were worried about the nuclear industry getting a black eye, so it's better everybody gets sick and die, and every species, then the nuclear industry gets a black eye or a bad reputation. And the industry will continue to do that until we hold them accountable. How can you rationalize something like that, see? How can you pretend that that doesn't matter? How can we pretend that never happened? TEPCO reports that workers will enter the damaged #1 reactor building to install filtering equipment for removing 95% of the radioactive dust from the air inside the building. There is zero possibility. They still never been into that building 14 years later. But see, those stories makes it sound like everything is hunky-dory. Go back to sleep. The aim is to create a working environment safe enough for workers to put in place a cooling system to replace the one that was damaged. Let me read that again. The aim is to create a working environment safe enough for the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society and the immigrants who don't speak the language, because that's who's going to go there. They're not going to go into that building, I can tell you that much, or any other building, to put in place a cooling system to replace the one that was damaged. Really, you think that's just damaged, do you? These people should be hung by a crane at a stadium with at least 100,000 people cheering and clapping that wrote these stories. And the victims' families should be allowed to run up and stab them as they're lifting them off the ground. Legally, of course. A TEPCO official told a disgusting parasitic Spectrum that the company also plans to construct a temporary wall or dike to protect the number 3 and 4 reactors. They're going to protect these reactors that don't even exist anymore, are they? By the way, that's the turbine buildings where they said they were getting water from. That hole is from one of the fuel assemblies going down through it. It's 1,800 pounds of plutonium and uranium in each assembly. It's 100 fuel rods. Each rod is 12 feet and weighs 18 pounds. Anybody that participated in that story at IEE Spectrum should be extinguished. Monday, the 9th of May, TEPCO workers and government safety officials entered the number 1 reactor building to carry out a survey of conditions inside, Dana. Okay. TEPCO workers, I got to read that again because it just don't seem anybody would be that evil to write something like that. TEPCO workers and government safety officials emptied. The government safety officials, the nuclear industry, and TEPCO employees entered the number 1 reactor building to carry out a survey. Really, they entered that building, really. They've still never went in there today. They put a Kevlar sarcophagus around it for 5 years. Chibu Electric Power Company says it will suspend operations of the Tomoka nuclear power plant until construction of a concrete seawall to protect the facility against tsunamis is completed. Well, that's mighty nice of you. May I have another? TEPCO reports that nuclear fuel rods in the number 1 reactor has suffered at least a partial meltdown. And the number 1 reactor has suffered at least a partial meltdown. To tell so many lies, they can't even keep it straight. TEPCO reveals it revised its plan for bringing Fukushima to a cold shutdown. You can't bring nuclear reactors that have melted down and 36 reactor cores that have melted down and 8 fuel pools into cold shutdown. It just doesn't work that way. Despite having discovered problems such as a partial meltdown and a suspected pressure vessel breach inside the number 1 reactor, they can't even keep their lies straight, can they? A suspected breach. Really. And they refuse to acknowledge anything, despite the obvious, to anybody with eyes that can see and that has any critical thinking skills whatsoever. We're almost finished. When I got 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 to go or something. But the company has changed how it plans to carry it out, for example. Instead of pumping fresh water into the damaged reactors, does that look damaged to anybody? Does anybody really... Would you describe that as damaged or non-existent? The water already pooled in the reactor buildings, you'll love this one. So the water that's already pooled in these reactor buildings will be decontaminated and used for cooling. Wrap your mind around that statement, folks. Because you don't want to account for more dumping into the ocean. Everything is dumped into the ocean. Nothing is stored. You can pretend what I'm saying is not true, but that's only because you're stupid. Because you're an idiot. I showed you enough information tonight that if you can't accept facts, you're a moron. And used for cooling. The water already pulled in the reactor building will be decontaminated and used for cooling. Thank you for being a sucker, said the people who wrote the story and not watching Dana's video. That's the video. Timeline, the Japanese nuclear emergency and overview by the despicable, revolting, parasitic IEEE Spectrum. And they are award-winning technology magazine and the flagship publication of IEEE, the world's largest professional organization devoted to engineering and applied sciences. They organize research conferences, published engineering journals, and is responsible for major technology standards, including the most famously Ethernet and Wi-Fi. Spectrum's missions have remained the same since its founding in 1964. Their charter is to keep the public and over 400,000 members informed about major trends in development in technology, engineering, and science. And their news stories, features, and special reports, podcasts, videos, infographics engage our readers with clear explanations about the emerging concept and development with details they can't get anywhere else. They have over 200 journals. They have 485,000 contributors, all academics and scientists. And they're literally the most evil entity conceivable, bar nothing. They're grotesque and parasitic monsters in every sense of that word. What they've done and what they continue to do is grotesque. It's unconscionable. And I apologize for such a long show. And I'm under a lot of stress. But there's nothing more important than what we're doing here. And it really makes me sick to my gummies, sick to my guts. It makes me sick to my soul that the world never had a chance because of people like this. It's so heartbreaking. Did all the media, universities, academics and journalists and Greenpeace and all the rest of them worldwide conspire to allow Earth to die of radiation poisoning? Because that's what's happening. That is what is happening. And if you go back through my videos, and you can go to my playlist and see, you see all of these videos of whales, birds, insects going extinct? Extinction event. Why are all species emaciated? All species of whales emaciated. Whales, birds, insects going extinct. You know, you go watch all of those videos over the next couple of weeks or months, and you'll come to the same conclusion as anybody else that's around here regularly, is that we are in an extinction level event. We are being exterminated. We are being exterminated. I don't know if James got a new video out. I don't think he did. I think he just ran into the ground, unfortunately. And we're going to play one of his songs that I really love a lot. It's called Less Than a Gram. You'll find it at his site I just showed you. And we played one of his songs earlier. We forgot to play an opening song tonight. I don't know if I've ever done that. We're going to play this song here. It's called Less Than a Gram. It's a short song. And it was about the internet, TEPCO trying to retrieve samples from a reactor for over a 4-year period. And what they retrieved was less than a gram. And the idea was to make you think how dangerous it was and everything else, and how brave they are to do something like that. And James created all the videos and the music in this. All of these songs and videos we play here all the time. And like the other song we played earlier, Nuclear Exceptionalism. This is another amazing song. You should listen to it with headphones on if you have them. I'm going to play it in a few seconds here. It's a fantastic song, and it's meant to highlight and he was linked to a story below the video. So if you go to his site, Less Than a Gram, look up that song. You link over to the story of why he wrote this particular song and produced it, and the video and music and everything else. We'll see you next time. Have a great night. Hugs for everybody. Take care.
Right beside old Unit 3 sits a shell-marked waste you see. Tanks of resin stacked with care, holding what the pumps caught there. TEPCO field 2 plans to show. One says yes, the other no. Each awaits a coming call. Neither clears the path at all. So they say, when the work might get underway. Decommission down the line, mid-century's hopeful sign. 880 tons remain, none retrieved from 3's domain. They debate what space to claim. Still the Buildington stays